When the Timberwolves first made the trade for Julius Randle, one of the biggest concerns that people had was the potential lack of spacing and what that would mean for a slasher like Anthony Edwards. So naturally, Ant responded by having one of the greatest three-point shooting seasons we've ever seen. And no, that isn't an exaggeration. He's attempting 10 threes a game and making over 40% of them. Throughout all of NBA history, the only players to ever reach both of these marks in a season have been Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Unlike those two though, Ant's attempts are disproportionately created off the dribble as opposed to off of movement or off the catch within a motion offense. Actually, I don't think a lot of people realize the magnitude of what he's doing as a pull-up shooter. The NBA started tracking pull-up shooting numbers back in 2013, and if we look at every recorded season since that point, a few guys notably stand out. Prime James Harden owns the 2 highest volume seasons by a landslide, and the closest guy is actually Luka from last season, who attempted about 8 a game at a 38% clip. Up top, you'll find the very best seasons of Steph Curry, who hit unrivaled heights in terms of efficiency, but I specifically want you to focus on that 2021 season because right next to him with very similar volume and efficiency is this current season from Ant, who's attempting 7.5 a game and making almost 41% of them. Right below him, you'll find the best season from Damian Lillard, and if we zoom in a little bit to make it look cleaner, you'll see the class of player Ant finds himself in. We're talking about a guy whose off-the-dribble three-point shooting rivals that of a prime Steph Curry and a peak Damian Lillard. Because of the threat of his slashing, he's able to get these shots off basically whenever he wants. In transition, defenders are almost always going to sag off to protect the paint, so he'll just walk into pull-up jumpers. And oftentimes you'll see him use this signature pound dribble with the left to freeze the defender before stepping back for a little bit more separation. Then of course, as soon as he brings the ball down and that defender presses up on the jumper, he's exploding into a drive and putting pressure on the rim. In the half court, the way he uses his handle to create space reminds me a lot of a prime James Harden. He's constantly sizing up his defender with between the legs dribbles as he reads them, then when they least expect it, he's stepping back into a long range jumper. In many ways, these isolations are what a right-handed Harden would look like. He throws it between his legs, snatches back to his left, then does that exact same move a second time to make his defender bite, leaving him with basically a wide open 3. Watch how he reads the defender after each move though. When he puts it between his legs and hesitates, he's looking to see if Chet's gonna play the drive or the jumper, then he reacts instantly by snatching back to his left with space to rise over the top. Now take a look at this play. He goes between his legs twice, hesitates, and Buzelis holds his position, so that's Ant's cue to turn on the jets and get to the cup. Much like Harden during that time, Ant probably has the most explosive first step in the entire NBA. So anytime he's left in single coverage or a defender ups the pressure on the ball, more times than not, the result is an automatic blow-by. The only thing that worries me is that with the elevated three-point shot, you don't want him favoring that over potential driving lanes, such as on a play like this. In transition, he's left with an entire side to work with while nobody's in position to protect the rim, and I think he lets the defense off the hook with this shot attempt. If we look at the rate of shots he's taken at the rim since entering the league, you'll see that this year has been a complete outlier in terms of how little he's getting to the basket, and I'd say there are a few factors at play here. The first is the sometimes questionable spacing. He spent a lot of times in lineups with multiple weak shooters, which allows defenses to get really aggressive with how they load up and wall off the paint, and almost forces him to hunt for his own offense over the top. But with that, I also think there's some questionable shot selection. Like on this one, OKC sends help early, and he could easily kick the ball to McDaniels, which would put the defense in rotation, only to instead size up his defender and step back into a really tough look. Although he's much improved, these types of plays still show up quite a bit. On this one, the Lakers are actually in a zone with all 5 players only worried about not letting him touch the paint, and again, Jaden is left on an island, only for the play to end with an off-balance contested long two. With that said, I actually think the bigger issue is that his style of driving relies more heavily on spacing than some of his peers. Let me explain. It all starts with that first step. Nobody can stay in front of him, and if he has space to take off vertically, he'll put anyone on a poster. That means bigs often have to get into position early, and that's when you'll see him use his length and sharp footwork to sneak by them with some strides. There's just one problem. If he tries to create those angles on the floor with slowed steps and the rim protector stays in front of him, he doesn't really have a counter for scoring over the top. A lot of great slashers complement their downhill attack with a floater, which is something he simply hasn't added yet. On the season, he's attempting about one floater per game and only converting 41% of the time, so this is something I'd really like to see him add as he progresses. I also think he can sometimes struggle with pace. That first step is so explosive and builds up so much speed, but after the initial blow-by, he isn't always in complete control. Here's a great example where he uses a screen to build up a head of steam, and instead of looking to slow down at about the nail and seek out a floater or a short jumper, he sort of launches himself into the big with no angle to finish. In my opinion, the use of pace out of drives is the biggest separator between a guy like Ant and a guy like Shai. Shai doesn't have the one-of-one explosiveness, but he's constantly starting and stopping, shifting gears, and redirecting to knife his way through tight gaps. And the way he's always in complete control of his momentum, when paired with the ability to stop on a dime, gives him unlimited access to the mid-range. That's another area in which Ant lacks. He's currently attempting about 6 mid-range shots every 75 possessions and only making a measly 38% of them. And even when he does get to the mid-range, it's rarely out of an isolation drive, often coming off of screens or out of the mid-post. So the spacing can be an issue, as can the shot selection, lack of a floater, and questionable pace at times. And the last thing that I'd say limits his driving game is that he does have his moments of tunnel vision. Sometimes you'll see him start a drive, draw extra help to the ball, and instead of finding the open man on a kickout pass, he'll either look for a foul or throw up an awkward shot. So when you combine all of these different weaknesses as both a scorer and a decision maker with the team's lack of spacing, you're left with someone who's been struggling to produce efficient offense inside the arc. Again, if we look at his 2-point percentage since entering the league, he's actually been even less efficient than his rookie season. And if we include the league's average during these years, you'll see that he's consistently fallen under that mark, now to the point where he's nearly 7% below average. However, I want to be very clear in saying that while some of these issues do hold him back from being a true MVP caliber player right now, he trends in the right direction with each passing game, and the amount of room he still has for growth is absolutely terrifying. The 2-point scoring will always be the foundation, but if this is just who he is as a 3-point shooter, those issues don't matter nearly as much. Also, I know I said that he sometimes struggles with tunnel vision out of drives. He's taken some serious strides throughout the course of this season though, and I think he's getting deeper into the paint, then finding those kick-out passes more and more. And because that first step basically gives him a runway to the paint on demand, the defense is constantly in a compromised position, so he creates a ton of advantages. As he continues to figure out the balance between the pull-up 3 and the slashing, like a prime James Harden did, we could be looking at one of the most dynamic isolation creators in the game. And that's especially scary because it's already turned him into one of the most dynamic pick and roll creators in the game. In years past, I think he struggled quite a bit with elite drop bigs. The pull-up 3 means that drop is no longer an option. In the first quarter against the Rockets, Sengun had an immediate instinct to drop, and by the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. So later on in the third, Sengun made sure to jump up to the ball, only for Ant to hesitate before exploding right around him with that first step. Now in the fourth, Sengun's thinking he has to get up to the level to prevent the 3 while sitting back enough to not get beat, which again leaves too much room for a jumper. That's just a peek into the headspace of a big who's forced to defend an Anthony Edwards pick and roll. Basically, nothing is a good option. If the point of attack defender goes under the screen, that's an automatic pull-up jumper. If that defender overplays the side of the screen in hopes of running him off the line, he'll reject the screen and attack open space in the opposite direction. If the big sits back in a drop or even a touch below the level, again, that's too much room. And if a big jumps all the way out to the 3-point line, chances are they aren't quick enough to contain him as a slasher. Basically, the defense is forced to put 2 on the ball at all times, and now we're getting to a point where he's legitimately picking apart these coverages. He said he's been studying Luka Doncic, and that's really apparent. The patience off of screens and the vision to hit skip passes from every inch of the floor is something you find with really high level playmakers. So when you pair the ability to make those types of reads consistently with the pressure he puts on the defense as both a shooter and driver, you're left with an absolute pick and roll maestro. This season, he's running 15.5 pick and rolls a game, which is 11th in the NBA. On those plays, the Wolves are generating 1.07 points per possession, which is more than some notable names like LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Cade Cunningham, and even Trae Young. So in my opinion, this year's experiment with Anthony Edwards basically running the point guard has been an absolute success. He's taken the leap into flat out one of the best off the dribble 3-point shooters we've ever seen. He remains as explosive of a slasher as ever, and with a few improvements on the margins can find a happy balance between that and the shooting to absolutely terrorize defenses in isolation. And with some added pace, decision making, and passing reads, he's become an elite pick and roll ball handler. But maybe the craziest part about all of this is that I actually think he has even more untapped potential away from the ball. Since entering the league, Ant has pretty exclusively played with traditional point guards or play finishers. Rarely ever has he had time to play off of another creator who can legitimately pressure defenses as both a scorer and a passer. I think Randle's by far the best he's ever had in that regard, and with the way they've been utilizing him as a point forward, we're probably going to see a lot more of Ant's off-ball game. Something that's been overlooked for years is how deadly of an off-the-catch shooter he is. Over the past 3 seasons, he's attempted 527 catch-and-shoot threes and made a very impressive 41.3% of them. And when you pair that caliber of shooting with the best first step in the league, you're left with a guy who can absolutely decimate defenses as a second side attacker. I'm not just talking about stationary, spot-up plays though. He's also shown to be a capable shooter off of screens, and that means set action is yet another way for him to create advantages, as he'll often draw 2 defenders off the catch and make a quick read to hit the roller for quality offense near the basket. Some defenses try to avoid giving up these advantages by fronting the side of the screen, but against Ant, all that does is open up the opportunity for him to explode into a backdoor cut. With each passing game, we're seeing more and more of what an actualized Anthony Edwards can look like at his peak. If they find a way to fully unleash this off-ball arsenal, along with everything he does with the ball, and everything he does on defense, we're talking about a guy who truly has a limitless two-way ceiling. Not only has he progressed throughout the season, the Wolves have figured out all of the different dynamics with everyone's fit on offense, and young guys have been given an opportunity to showcase their unique skill sets and grow organically. So not only are they setting themselves up for a competitive playoff run, they're setting themselves up for the entire Edwards era. And with the way he's looked this season, I'm bought all the way in. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Edwards. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.